Deep in the Costa Rican jungle lie stone spheres of impossible perfection. These ancient artifacts are one of archaeology's greatest puzzles, and by the end of this, you will understand the full scope of this human mystery, from its chaotic discovery to the cutting-edge science trying to crack it. How did a civilization without modern tools craft such flawless forms? And what powerful message were they meant to send across 1,000 years? What does it mean when a civilization leaves behind a message we can no longer read? The jungle was being tamed for commerce when it gave up its first secret. In the 1930s, the United Fruit Company was clearing vast tracts of land in Costa Rica's Diquís Delta, a region of thick rainforest and swamp, to make way for banana plantations. Their heavy machinery carved roads and fields through the ancient landscape, a process of modern industry meeting timeless earth. And then the blades and bulldozers began to strike something hard, something unnaturally round. Workers would later describe finding these perfect stone forms, some as tall as a person, emerging from the soil like giant, petrified fruits. The initial reaction was not wonder but speculation. Local legends and hopeful rumors swirled, with many convinced the spheres must be hollow and filled with gold, a treasure left by some forgotten people. This belief led to heartbreaking acts of vandalism. Spheres were drilled into, cracked open with sledgehammers, and in some desperate cases, even blasted with dynamite, all in a futile search for riches that were never there. Inside, they found only solid stone. This period of destructive curiosity, while it damaged or destroyed untold numbers of artifacts, had one unintended consequence. It made the spheres impossible to ignore. Word of these strange objects reached archaeologists like Doris Stone, the daughter of a United Fruit Company executive, and later Samuel Lothrop of Harvard University. They looked past the shattered remains and saw what the laborers had not, a profound archaeological mystery crafted with breathtaking skill. Their intervention was crucial. They began formal surveys, documented the spheres, and argued for their preservation, effectively rescuing the remaining giants from the path of progress and planting the first flag of scientific inquiry into this newly discovered enigma. The modern puzzle of the stone spheres had officially begun, born from an act of destruction and saved by a spark of recognition. The true scale of this mystery becomes clear when you stand beside one. These are not rough, rounded boulders. They are artifacts of startling precision, a catalogue of perfection carved in stone. Their sizes vary dramatically. Some are small enough to hold in your hands, mere curiosities a few centimeters across. Others are monumental, colossal globes standing over 2 meters tall, which is more than 6 feet, and weighing as much as 16 tons, the equivalent of several large elephants. The material itself is a clue. Most were carved from gabbro, a hard, coarse-grained igneous rock stubbornly resistant to shaping. Others were made from slightly softer limestone or sandstone, but the challenge of working any of these materials with primitive tools is almost unimaginable. Yet the most breathtaking detail is their shape. When modern researchers finally took calipers and measuring tapes to these spheres, they discovered something that defied expectation. Many of the spheres exhibit a near-perfect spherical form, with the diameter varying by less than 2 centimeters across the entire surface. To put that in perspective, on a sphere taller than a person, the difference from one side to the other is less than the width of your thumb. This is not an accident of nature. This is precision engineering. Achieving this required more than just patience. It demanded a sophisticated, likely generational, understanding of geometry and symmetry. The surfaces tell a story of immense effort, meticulously pecked with stone tools, then ground and polished for untold hours until they achieved a smooth, often lustrous finish. Each sphere represents a staggering investment of human labor and intellect, a silent testament to a culture that valued perfection in form. But this precision only deepens the central question: a question that haunted the first archaeologists to study them. If they were not natural and they were clearly not practical, then what profound purpose could justify such an immense and careful effort? The people behind this astonishing feat are known as the Diquís culture. From roughly 800 years after the Common Era until Spanish ships appeared on their shores in the 16th century, this sophisticated society thrived in the very river valleys and forests where the spheres were found. Their world was one of complexity and hierarchy. They were not a simple, scattered people, but a civilization with advanced farming that shaped the landscape, master artisans who worked precious jade and gold into intricate ornaments, and builders who raised significant public structures, the foundations of which still whisper from beneath the soil. For them, the stone spheres were not a hobby or an afterthought. They represent the absolute peak of their stoneworking technology, a project that demanded the coordinated effort of their entire society. Think of the logistics alone: selecting the right boulder from a distant quarry, transporting a 16-ton block of stone without wheels or draft animals, the countless hours of pecking and polishing by teams of skilled craftsmen. This was not the work of a single village, but of a culture with the organization, resources, and shared purpose to commit generations to this singular artistic vision. As such, the spheres are their most iconic and enduring legacy. While their gold was melted down and their stories were lost, these silent stone sentinels endured. They offer us our clearest, yet still frustratingly opaque, window into the Diquís mind. They are a physical manifestation of a world we can no longer hear, a language of geometry and permanence spoken by a people whose social structure, beliefs, and daily lives remain shrouded in the mists of time. We have their masterpiece, but we have lost the meaning, and this disconnect between the object and its purpose leads us directly to the most debated question of all, a question that has fueled speculation for decades. What in the world were these perfect stones actually for? The sheer physical challenge of their creation is almost beyond comprehension. How did a people without metal tools, without the wheel, and without animals strong enough to pull such weight, achieve this level of stoneworking perfection? The answer lies not in a single magical technique, but in a grueling, multi-stage marathon of human ingenuity and effort. Leading theories pieced together from tool marks and experimental archaeology suggest a process that borders on the obsessive. It likely began with the careful selection of a massive boulder from a riverbed or quarry. To break it free and begin shaping it, craftsmen may have used controlled fire, heating the stone's surface and then dousing it with water. This rapid thermal shock would create a network of tiny fractures, weakening the rock just enough to be worked. Then came the relentless pecking stage. Using hand-held hammers made from another equally hard stone like quartzite, workers would strike the surface countless times, each blow flaking away a tiny piece of the granite or gabbro. Imagine the sound, a constant, rhythmic tapping echoing for months, slowly transforming an angular block into a rough sphere. But the true secret to their flawless form came next, in a final act of meticulous refinement. The rough sphere would be ground, likely by rolling or rubbing it against another large stone slab, using a mixture of abrasive sand and water. This was the polishing phase, a painstaking process that could last for years, slowly wearing down every imperfection until the surface was smooth and the geometry approached true spherical perfection. This was not a task for a lone artisan. It demanded a coordinated, dedicated workforce, a community investing thousands of person-hours into a single object. The largest spheres represent a staggering commitment, a project that may have spanned generations. This immense labor forces us to ask an even deeper question. What belief, what social power, what cosmic idea was so important that it justified not just making one of these, but dozens, and placing them in arrangements that transformed the very landscape? But crafting perfection in the quarry was just the beginning. The greater challenge may have been the journey. These monumental spheres were not found where the raw stone was sourced. Geological studies tell us the rock came from the foothills of the Talamanca Mountains, yet the spheres were discovered settled in valleys dozens of kilometers away. Imagine the task moving a 16-ton stone globe, an object of delicate precision, through dense, muddy jungle, across rivers, and over uneven terrain, all without the wheel or draft animals. The logistics are staggering, and they point to a society of remarkable engineers. The most likely method involved a symphony of simple machines and human power. Teams would have laid down a track of wooden logs, using them as rollers. With ropes made from vines or fibers and massive wooden levers, hundreds of people could slowly, inch by inch, coax the sphere forward, constantly repositioning the log track as they went. It was a process of immense coordination and exhausting labor. Some researchers suggest the spheres might have been transported while still partially rough, in a more blocky form, to make them easier to move and to prevent catastrophic chips or cracks during the journey, with the final, delicate polishing done at their destination. Another tantalizing theory looks to the waterways. Could the Diquís have used the region's rivers as ancient highways? A massive sphere, carefully secured on a raft, could have been floated downstream with far less effort than an overland haul, a clever use of the landscape itself. Each theory underscores the same incredible fact: this was not an art project for a few, but a communal undertaking that mobilized the entire society. The movement of the spheres was a public spectacle of power and purpose, a visible proof of what people could achieve together. And where they finally chose to stop and place these stones is where the mystery turns celestial. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of the spheres is not their creation but their scattering. When archaeologists like Samuel Lothrop first began their formal surveys, they made a critical observation. The spheres were rarely solitary. They were found in groups carefully placed in deliberate arrangements across the landscape. Some formed perfect triangles on the ground. Others were set in long, straight lines or configured into precise geometric shapes like parallelograms. These were not random deposits, they were compositions. Each grouping was a statement, a sentence written in the language of stone and space. And then we lost the translation. In the decades following their discovery, before their cultural value was legally protected, the spheres were treated as mere curiosities. Hundreds were violently uprooted from their ancient settings by bulldozers and tractors. They were rolled onto trucks and taken away to become decorative ornaments in the gardens of private homes, hotels, and government buildings. A few even ended up as quirky roundabouts in town squares. While this saved many spheres from destruction, it created an archaeological catastrophe of a different kind. It erased their context completely. Imagine finding the pieces of a magnificent clock, beautifully crafted gears and springs, but someone has swept them off the table and tossed them into a box. You can admire each piece's craftsmanship, but you will never know how the clock told time. That is our predicament. We have the individual words, the perfect stone spheres, but the sentence they formed, the grammar of their arrangement, has been obliterated. This loss is the single largest obstacle to understanding their purpose. Were those straight lines pointing toward significant mountains or the rising sun on a solstice? Did those triangles map the positions of important stars, creating a celestial calendar etched into the earth? Or did the arrangements reflect social structure, with larger spheres denoting clan leaders or spiritual authorities, their spatial relationships mirroring the hierarchy of the Diquís world itself? Every theory about the sphere's function, from astronomical observatory to social symbol, hinges on the meaning of those original placements. Without that data, we are left with brilliant fragments, forced to guess at the blueprint of a vanished mind. The patterns are gone, and with them, perhaps the only key that could unlock the sphere's true message. This leads us to one of the most compelling ideas about their purpose. Perhaps these perfect spheres were not just earthly art, but a map of the heavens. The theory that the Diquís built a sophisticated astronomical observatory is both popular and profoundly romantic. Think about it, a civilization that could master geometry in stone would certainly have turned their eyes to the sky. The precise alignments of the sphere groups, those lost patterns of lines and triangles, could have functioned as a giant, permanent calendar carved into the landscape. A line of 3 spheres might have pointed directly to the spot on the horizon where the sun rose on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Another arrangement could have marked the equinox when day and night are equal. For an agricultural society like the Diquís, this knowledge was not abstract science, it was survival. Knowing exactly when the rains would come or when the dry season would end dictated the timing of planting and harvest. The spheres could have been their almanac, a way to anchor their calendar to the unwavering cycles of the cosmos. We see this same impulse in ancient monuments across the world, from the massive stones of Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain to the solar observatories of the Maya. The Diquís, it seems, may have been part of this universal human endeavor to read the sky, using their unique language of spherical perfection. Yet this beautiful theory faces a stark practical problem. To prove an astronomical alignment, you need 2 things: the exact original position of the stones and the exact celestial event you believe they mark. We have lost the first part completely. Without those original coordinates, any attempt to match the spheres to stars or sunrises is educated guesswork. We are trying to reconstruct a clock face after someone has thrown all the numbers into a bag. So while the astronomical observatory theory remains a powerful and elegant explanation for why such geometric precision mattered so much, it lives in the realm of compelling possibility, not proven fact. This pushes us to consider another, perhaps more human, dimension to the mystery. If the spheres were not pointing to the gods in the sky, perhaps they were representing the powers right here on the ground. Perhaps the spheres were less about mapping stars and more about mapping society itself. Another compelling theory strips away the celestial to focus on the earthly, viewing these objects not as astronomical tools but as profound symbols of social status, power, and wealth. In this interpretation, the sphere is the ultimate luxury item, a declaration carved in immovable stone. Think of the message it sends. The size, perfection, and sheer number of spheres placed outside a chief's residence or a central gathering ground would have been an undeniable visual display of authority. A single, massive sphere announced, the person who commands this commands the people who made it. A collection of them in a precise arrangement would have been like a family crest or a corporate logo on a monumental scale, legitimizing a lineage's claim to the land and its resources for generations. The labor itself was the proof. Commissioning a sphere was an act of economic power. It meant you could divert dozens, perhaps hundreds, of workers from farming or other essential tasks for months or years. It meant you had the social organization to feed and house those workers, and the political clout to make it happen. The sphere, therefore, was not just a symbol of power, it was the physical residue of power in action. It turned the abstract concept of a chief's authority into a permanent, unignorable monument. Anyone approaching would see it and understand their place in the hierarchy. In this light, the spheres functioned as territorial markers, but of a very sophisticated kind. They didn't just say, "This land is mine." They said, "This land is mine because my ancestors and my people possessed the skill, the unity, and the will to create this impossible thing and place it here." They were anchors of identity in the landscape, making social status as solid and enduring as the stone itself. Yet, if they were symbols of power meant to inspire awe and obedience, that purpose may have extended beyond the living, into a realm that connects the community to its ancestors and to the very fabric of the cosmos. The shape itself may be the most important clue we have. A perfect sphere, unlike any other form, carries a universal symbolic weight across human history. From the distant planets in the night sky to the life-giving sun and the cyclical moon, the sphere is the shape of the cosmos. For the Diquís, whose daily lives were governed by agricultural cycles tied to that very cosmos, this connection would have been immediate and profound. It is almost impossible to look at one of these flawless granite orbs and not see a representation of a celestial body, a piece of the heavens made permanent on Earth. This moves the conversation beyond social status and into the realm of the sacred. The spheres could have been far more than markers of a chief's authority. They could have been physical anchors for the gods themselves, or perhaps vessels for spiritual power. In many Polynesian and indigenous American belief systems, certain objects are believed to hold mana, a sacred life force or spiritual energy. The immense, focused labor poured into creating a sphere, the very act of transforming a rough, earthly rock into a symbol of cosmic perfection, could have been a ritual in itself, a way to imbue the stone with this potent energy. Once activated, these stones might have been placed to consecrate a space, turning a clearing into a temple, or aligning a community with the divine order of the universe. Their groupings could have mirrored constellations, creating a sacred landscape, a map where the earthly and the heavenly realms were one and the same. Rituals performed among them, perhaps at key solar or lunar events, would have been a direct communion with ancestors and deities, a way to ensure balance, fertility, and continuity for the people. The quest for geometric perfection, then, was not a technical challenge but a spiritual imperative. A perfect sphere reflected a harmonious universe, and by creating it, the Diquís were actively participating in maintaining that cosmic harmony. This layer of meaning makes their loss after European contact especially tragic. The worldviews, the stories, the specific prayers and ceremonies that gave these stones their true voice were largely erased, leaving us with only the silent, beautiful vessels. We are left staring at what was clearly an altar, but we can no longer hear the hymns that were sung there, and this profound silence invites a final, unsettling line of inquiry. If these were objects of such deep power and meaning, could they have also been seen as conduits for something else, something that connected the people not just to the sky, but to the very land beneath their feet in ways we are only beginning to grasp? Of course, no ancient mystery would be complete without its share of wild speculation. When faced with an artifact of such baffling perfection, it is almost a human reflex to reach for extraordinary explanations. And so, the stone spheres of Costa Rica have, over the decades, been claimed as evidence for two of history's most persistent fringe theories. Some have declared them relics of the lost continent of Atlantis, left behind by a superior civilization that sank beneath the waves. Others look at their flawless geometry and see the handiwork of ancient astronauts, visitors from another world who gifted or left behind this technology. On the surface, these ideas seem thrilling, a way to inject cosmic drama into a silent stone, but they share a common and rather troubling foundation. At their core, they stem from a disbelief, a refusal to accept that the indigenous people of this land, the Diquís culture, possessed the ingenuity and skill to create such marvels on their own. The underlying message is that this perfection must be too perfect, too advanced to be human. This perspective, however romantic it may seem, is not just incorrect, it fundamentally disrespects the profound achievement it tries to explain. Archaeologists have a firm and evidence-based response to these claims, and it doesn't involve lost continents or interstellar travelers. The truth, they argue, is both more impressive and entirely human. Every step in the sphere's creation, from quarrying to shaping to polishing, falls squarely within the known technological toolkit of pre-Columbian societies. We have found the stone hammers, the grinding slabs, and the abrasive sands they would have used. Experimental archaeology has proven the point. Modern craftsmen, using only replica stone tools and the techniques believed to have been available, have successfully shaped smaller granite spheres, demonstrating that patience, skill, and generational knowledge are the only advanced technologies required. The process is brutally slow and demands immense effort, but it is undeniably possible. The alien or Atlantis theories, while fun for speculative fiction, commit a critical error. They look at a mountain of human achievement and see only a mystery that needs solving from the outside. In doing so, they disregard the breathtaking ingenuity, the coordinated social will, and the sheer artistic vision of the Diquís people. They rob a real, vibrant culture of its legacy, handing credit for its greatest masterpiece to a fictional or extraterrestrial source. The real story is not about outside intervention. It is about what human beings are capable of when united by a shared purpose and a deep connection to their world. And that true story leads us to an even more pressing modern dilemma, one that threatens these very stones. If we finally understand their immense human value, how do we protect them from the relentless pressures of our own time? Yet the very forces that saved the spheres from obscurity now threaten their existence in new ways. Modern dangers are far more subtle than dynamite, but just as relentless. The expansion of agriculture continues, with deep plowing and heavy machinery risking damage to spheres still buried or on private land. Urban sprawl and new construction projects encroach on ancient sites, while the illegal antiquities trade creates a constant threat of looting. Even the elements themselves are a slow, patient adversary. The tropical climate of Costa Rica, with its intense sun, heavy rains, and cycles of humidity, works tirelessly on the stone. Thermal expansion and contraction can cause microscopic cracks that grow over centuries, and biological growth like lichen slowly etches away at the polished surfaces. Each sphere is in a silent, perpetual battle against time and progress. Faced with these layered threats, Costa Rica has mobilized to become the guardian of its own heritage. The approach is twofold, combining urgent protection with profound respect. At many original sites, rather than removing the spheres entirely, archaeologists have constructed elegant, open-air shelters over them. These structures shield the stones from the worst of the sun and rain while allowing visitors to see them in their native context, a compromise between preservation and presence. Other spheres deemed too vulnerable have been carefully relocated to the safety of museums, like the National Museum in San Jose, where they can be studied and admired in a controlled environment. But the most powerful shield came in 2014. In that year, UNESCO declared 4 key archaeological zones in the Diquís region, Finca 6, Batambal, El Silencio, and Grijalba 2, as a World Heritage Site. This was not just a title. The designation, officially called the pre-Columbian chiefdom settlements with stone spheres of the Diquís, frames the spheres not as isolated curiosities, but as integral parts of a complete cultural landscape. It recognizes the settlements, the mounds, the plazas, and the spheres together as a single, irreplaceable testament to a civilization. This global recognition triggers vital international support, funding, and expertise for conservation. It elevates their importance on the world stage, making their protection a shared human responsibility rather than a local concern. The fight today is no longer about discovering what the spheres are, but about ensuring they endure so that future generations can continue the quest to understand what they meant. Every preserved sphere is a preserved possibility, a chance that one day, with new technology or a fresh perspective, we might finally hear the whisper in the stone. And that enduring hope brings us to the cutting edge of the mystery, where modern science is now applying its most sophisticated tools not to move the spheres but to listen to them. Among the protected sites, Finca 6 offers the closest thing we have to a time capsule. This archaeological park is a rare and precious window, a place where the spheres are not isolated museum pieces but remain embedded in the very landscape they were meant to transform. Here, the jungle has been respectfully peeled back to reveal the foundations of ancient homes, the raised earthen mounds that likely served as platforms for important buildings, and most importantly, several of the stone spheres still resting exactly where the Diquís people placed them centuries ago. You can walk the same ground and see what they saw, the most intact arrangements left in the world. One path leads you to a perfect straight line of multiple spheres, like giant stone beads on an invisible string stretching across the earth. Another reveals a precise triangular grouping, a geometric statement frozen in time. These are not recreations or guesses, they are the original compositions, and that makes all the difference. For a researcher, this preserved context is everything. By meticulously mapping the distances between each sphere in a line, and then measuring their relationship to the nearby house mounds and ceremonial spaces, archaeologists can begin to ask concrete questions. Does the line point toward a specific mountain peak visible on the horizon? Does the triangle frame the entrance to a particular dwelling, perhaps marking it as a leader's home? The spatial data from Finca 6 provides the hard evidence that has been missing from every displaced sphere, turning speculation into a solvable puzzle. For a visitor, the impact is more visceral. You are not just looking at a strange object, you are standing inside a community. The small museum on site helps complete the picture, displaying pottery, tools, and delicate goldwork that once belonged to the very people who lived among these stone giants. It connects the monumental to the mundane, reminding us that this was a place of daily life, of families, of craft, and of ceremony. Finca 6 proves the spheres were not dropped from the sky or left by visitors from afar. They were woven into the fabric of a vibrant, complex society. They were part of the neighborhood, and if we can understand how they fit into that neighborhood, we might finally hear the conversation they were having with the people who made them. This tangible connection at Finca 6 makes the silence from other sites even more profound, a silence that modern technology is now desperately trying to fill. The silence of the tools is almost as profound as the silence of the spheres themselves. While we can reconstruct the broad strokes of their creation, the intimate, hands-on details of the craft are missing. Archaeologists have indeed found stone hammers and grinding slabs in the region, heavy cobbles of quartzite and other hard rocks worn smooth from relentless use. These are the obvious candidates, the brute force instruments, yet a complete, definitive toolkit, the artisan's personal set of implements, has never been discovered in direct association with a sphere in progress. This absence leaves a tantalizing gap in our understanding. We know they pecked and ground, but with what precise finesse? Were the hammerstones a graduated set, from fist-sized pounders for rough work to delicate, pebble-sized tools for fine finishing? The selection of the abrasive sand itself was likely a science. Not just any sand would do. They would have needed a grit harder than the gabbro they were shaping, perhaps quartz sand gathered from specific riverbeds, mixed with water to form a grinding paste of just the right consistency. This paste would have been their sandpaper, their polishing compound, applied over countless hours. Then there is the puzzle of measurement. Achieving that near-perfect spherical form implies a constant checking, a feedback loop between the eye, the hand, and some standard of truth. Did they use a simple but effective device, like a length of vine or fiber cord tied to a central pivot, sweeping it around the stone to check for high spots? Or perhaps they employed a wooden compass or a frame. These ephemeral tools, made of perishable wood and fiber, have vanished into the soil, leaving only the perfect stone that proves they must have existed. This is where experimental archaeology becomes a form of time travel. Modern craftsmen, using only replica stone tools and materials available 1,000 years ago, dedicate themselves to the grueling reenactment of the process. Each strike of a granite hammer, each long hour of grinding with sand and water, is a physical question posed to the past. When they succeed in creating even a small, truly round sphere, they are not just replicating an object, they are rediscovering a lost body of knowledge. They feel the vibration in their arms from a misplaced strike. They learn the exact sound a rock makes when it is ready to flake. They understand the muscle memory required to maintain a consistent curve. This hands-on experimentation reveals the sphere's creation not as a single brilliant idea, but as a mountain of iterative problem-solving. Every sphere was a conversation between the craftsman and the stone, a slow negotiation where skill, patience, and a deep, tactile intelligence gradually persuaded a wild boulder to become a perfect expression of order. The human fascination with the sphere is not confined to a single jungle or culture. While the Diquís spheres stand alone in their concentration and breathtaking precision, echoes of this form appear in other parts of the ancient world, creating a fascinating web of comparative mysteries. In parts of Mexico and Guatemala, archaeologists have uncovered smaller stone spheres, often associated with the Great Maya civilization. These examples are intriguing, but they differ in critical ways. They are generally much smaller, less perfectly round, and far fewer in number. They appear more as sculptural accents within architectural complexes rather than the central, landscape-defining monuments of Costa Rica. Their existence suggests the sphere as an appealing shape, a geometric idea that resonated across Mesoamerica, but the Diquís took that idea and elevated it into a civilization's defining obsession. A more controversial comparison lies across the Atlantic in Bosnia. Here, in the town of Zavidovici, dozens of large, remarkably spherical stones were unearthed. Promoted by researcher Semir Osmanagic as ancient, man-made artifacts potentially older than the pyramids, they ignited public imagination and were dubbed the Bosnian stone balls. The visual similarity is striking, smooth, rounded forms emerging from the earth. However, the scientific consensus tells a very different story. After extensive study, most geologists identify these spheres as natural formations called concretions. They are created over immense spans of time when mineral cement precipitates and crystallizes around a central nucleus within sedimentary rock, eventually weathering out into spherical shapes. While undoubtedly impressive natural wonders, they lack the telltale marks of human tooling, the evidence of quarrying, and the deliberate cultural placement seen in Costa Rica. This distinction is crucial. It separates a marvel of geology from a masterpiece of culture. This global phenomenon, whether born of human hands or geological chance, points to something deeper than archaeology. The sphere holds a unique power over the human mind. It is a shape of perfect symmetry, of no beginning and no end, representing unity, the celestial bodies, and wholeness. It is a form that nature produces in planets and bubbles, and one that humans instinctively gravitate toward and attempt to replicate. Seeing these spherical shapes emerge from the soil in disparate parts of the world touches a primal sense of wonder. Yet, placing the Diquís spheres beside these other examples does not diminish their mystery, it magnifies it. The Bosnian stones, however beautiful, are natural accidents. The Mesoamerican spheres are intriguing but modest footnotes. The Diquís creations, however, represent a deliberate, sustained, and monumental campaign. Their scale is unmatched, with the largest weighing many tons. Their quantity is staggering, with hundreds documented, and their precision, that near-flawless geometry achieved through generations of labor, stands as a testament to a specific, powerful intention that we are still struggling to comprehend. They transformed a universal shape into a unique cultural language, and if that language was about connecting to the cosmos or anchoring power in the land, then perhaps the ultimate purpose of the spheres was not just to be seen, but to be used in a way that actively shaped the reality of the people who made them. The stones were never meant to be seen alone. To truly understand them, we must lift our gaze from the individual sphere and look at the world it was placed within. Recent research is making a powerful shift, moving beyond the artifact itself to examine its deep, intentional relationship with the environment. This is not just about where they ended up, but why that specific spot was chosen. A clear pattern emerges when you map their locations. Many spheres are found clustered near the banks of rivers, positioned on prominent hilltops with commanding views, or settled on the rich, flat alluvial plains where the Diquís grew their crops. This is not a coincidence of preservation, it is a deliberate signature. One compelling theory posits that these perfect stones functioned as sophisticated territorial markers, but of a very specific kind. Placed along a riverbank, a sphere could have denoted a clan's exclusive fishing rights or access to that vital water source. On a hilltop, it could have served as a visible sentinel, its smooth curve a silent claim over the valley below. The landscape itself becomes a map, and the spheres are the pins marking ownership, resources, and social jurisdiction. But the connection likely ran deeper than simple property lines. Water held profound spiritual significance for nearly all ancient agricultural societies, seen as a life force and a conduit to the underworld or the divine. Placing a sphere at the head of a spring or at a key confluence of rivers could have consecrated that place, turning a practical water source into a sacred one. The sphere's perfect, reflective surface adds another layer of poetic possibility. When placed beside still water, a sphere would create a mesmerizing double image, a complete orb floating above its own reflection. This could have been seen as a powerful symbol of unity, of the earthly and the spiritual realms meeting. Under the bright tropical sun, a polished granite surface would have gleamed, perhaps catching the first or last light of the day in a way that marked solar events. A sphere on a hilltop might have glinted like a beacon for miles around, a man-made star anchored to the earth. This holistic view changes everything. It asks us to stop seeing the spheres as isolated masterpieces in a void, and to start seeing them as focal points within a living, integrated cultural landscape. The Diquís were not just dropping sculptures onto random plots of land. They were carefully modifying their world, shaping the very geography to reflect their beliefs, their social structure, and their understanding of the cosmos. A sphere placed on a man-made mound overlooking a river plain becomes more than art. It becomes the anchor of a worldview. It ties the community to their life-sustaining crops, to the water that nourished them, and to the celestial cycles that govern the seasons. The arrangement of multiple spheres in a line might not just point to a star, but could also trace the path of an ancestral migration or mirror the flow of the river below. This approach considers the entire package, the spheres, the house platforms, the burial sites, the fields, and the waterways, as a single, interconnected system. The stone sphere was the exclamation point in a long, complex sentence written across the land. By reading that full sentence, we might finally grasp the grammar of their world. And if the spheres were anchors in a landscape charged with meaning, then perhaps their ultimate purpose was not static but active. Perhaps they were not just symbols to be admired, but instruments to be used in rituals that connected the people directly to the very forces of nature they so carefully mapped. Determining their age is a puzzle locked within the stone itself. While we can admire their form and theorize about their purpose, the fundamental question of when they were carved has proven incredibly difficult to answer. This is because the primary tool of archaeology, radiocarbon dating, is useless on the spheres. That technique relies on measuring the decay of radioactive carbon in once living organic materials like wood, bone, or charcoal. But granite and gabbro were never alive. They hold no carbon to measure. The stone itself is silent on its birthday. So archaeologists must become detectives of context, looking not at the sphere but at everything surrounding it. If a sphere is found still sitting in its original placement, embedded in an ancient soil layer, the real treasure is what lies in that same layer. A fragment of charcoal from a cooking hearth built nearby, or a shard of decorated pottery left behind. These are the timekeepers. By using radiocarbon dating on that charcoal, or by comparing the pottery style to a known chronological sequence, researchers can establish a probable date for the entire archaeological layer, and by extension for the sphere within it. Another ingenious approach has been to look for the ghost of the manufacturing process. The theory of using fire to fracture the raw stone leaves a forensic clue. When soil is heated to a high temperature, its mineral crystals reset, trapping energy like a tiny battery. Scientists can use a method called thermoluminescence dating on that soil, measuring the light released when it is reheated in a lab to determine when it was last exposed to intense heat, potentially dating the moment of quarrying or initial shaping. The collective evidence from these contextual clues points to a vibrant era of creation. The spheres appear to belong predominantly to what is known as the Chiriqui period, a span from around 800 years after the Common Era until the arrival of Europeans in the 16th century. This was the cultural golden age of the Diquís, a time of social complexity and artistic flourishing. Yet this broad 500-year window is the heart of the ongoing mystery. We cannot yet say if a specific, magnificent sphere was carved in the year 900 or in 1400. This gap in precision has huge implications for understanding the society behind them. Were all the spheres we see the product of a concentrated, feverish campaign over a few generations, a kind of cultural renaissance driven by a powerful ruler or a new religious idea? Or was sphere making a slow, steady tradition, passed down from master to apprentice over half a millennium, with each new generation adding a few more perfect orbs to the landscape? The answer changes the story completely. A concentrated project speaks to a singular, overwhelming societal purpose. A long tradition suggests the spheres were a deeply ingrained element of their identity, as fundamental and evolving as their language. Without the ability to ask each stone its age, we are left with a chorus of possibilities, all speaking from the same vast stretch of time. This silence we grapple with today was not a natural fading but a violent severing. The arrival of Spanish ships on the shores of Costa Rica in the early 16th century did not just introduce new people, it unleashed an apocalypse for the world of the Diquís. The conquistadors and colonists who followed brought with them a trio of devastating forces: steel, scripture, and sickness. While direct military conflict occurred, the deadliest weapon was invisible. Diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza, against which the indigenous population had no immunity, swept through communities like wildfire. In some regions, historians estimate up to 90% of the native population perished within a few generations. This was not just a loss of life, it was the annihilation of living libraries. The master craftsmen who knew the secrets of shaping gabbro, the elders who recited the stories of why the spheres were placed, the astronomers who read the sky and translated it into stone alignments, they were all gone. The social fabric that coordinated hundreds of people to move a 16-ton sphere unraveled overnight. Survivors were often forcibly relocated into mission settlements, a policy called reduction, designed to control and convert them. Their traditional lands, the very landscapes inscribed with the sphere arrangements, were taken. Their languages, rituals, and social hierarchies were systematically suppressed by the colonial authorities and the Catholic Church, seen as pagan obstacles to salvation and control. Within a span of decades, the complex civilization that could orchestrate such monumental projects was shattered. The spheres themselves, once central to their worldview, were now just strange stones in the way of new farms and pastures, their meaning already fading from memory. This is the core of the mystery's profundity. We are not piecing together a puzzle from a culture that slowly evolved into something else. We are trying to reconstruct a song from a single, surviving note because the singers and the language were lost. No oral histories were passed down, no written records, if they ever existed, survived this rupture. The Diquís left no Rosetta Stone for their stone spheres. This cultural amnesia transforms the spheres from mere artifacts into something far more haunting. They are the last, loudest echoes of a silenced world. They stand as perfect, permanent questions because the people who held the answers were erased. This historical tragedy makes the archaeological work to understand them not just an intellectual exercise, but an act of poignant recovery. Every ground-penetrating radar scan, every soil analysis, every attempt to map a remaining alignment is an effort to give voice back to a culture that was forcibly muted, to listen for a whisper that has taken 500 years to reach us. The silence of the past is now being met with a vibrant voice in the present. Today in Costa Rica, the stone spheres have transcended their archaeological mystery to become something even more powerful, a profound symbol of national identity and cultural pride. You will find their perfect form imprinted on the nation's postage stamps, engraved into its currency, and celebrated in public sculptures and murals. They have moved from the realm of academic journals into the heart of everyday life, representing not just a puzzle, but a unique heritage that distinguishes this land on the world stage. This reclamation is a conscious act, a way for a modern nation to root its identity in the deep, sophisticated history that predates colonial chapters. But the most significant reclamation is happening at a more intimate level. For the contemporary indigenous communities living in the regions surrounding the Diquís Delta, these stones are a direct physical connection to their ancestors. They are not merely artifacts behind glass, but a testament to a legacy of ingenuity, a proof that their forebears were master engineers and artists who shaped the world with purpose and vision. Recognizing this living link is transforming preservation. There is a growing, vital effort to involve these descendant communities directly in the stewardship and storytelling at the UNESCO World Heritage sites. Their perspectives, oral histories, and cultural understandings are being invited to help interpret the spheres, not as dead relics, but as active participants in a continuing story. This collaborative shift changes everything. It means the spheres are no longer seen solely through the lens of Western archaeology, with its focus on dates and tools, but also through the lens of cultural memory and spiritual resonance. They are being woven back into the social fabric, reclaimed as part of a living legacy. In this light, the spheres become symbols of incredible resilience. They survived the jungle, they survived dynamite, and they survived centuries of being misunderstood. Now they stand as silent teachers, reminding everyone who sees them of the depth of time and the enduring human spirit on this land. They inspire a new generation to look at their patrimony not as a forgotten secret, but as a source of strength and inspiration, a reason to protect the stories still held in the earth and to ensure that this remarkable conversation between past and future never falls silent again. The silence of the stones is finally meeting its match in the hum of a scanner. While we cannot ask the spheres their secrets, we can now listen to them in a new way by capturing their every curve and flaw with a precision the Diquís artisans themselves would have admired. This is the frontier of digital archaeology, where lasers and cameras are becoming our most sensitive tools. Archaeologists are now employing techniques like laser scanning and photogrammetry to create hyper-accurate three-dimensional models of each sphere. Imagine a process where a sphere is slowly encircled by a tripod-mounted laser, which fires millions of tiny beams to measure the exact distance to every point on its surface. Or a camera takes hundreds of overlapping photographs from every conceivable angle, and sophisticated software stitches them together into a perfect digital twin. The result is not just a picture, it is a measurable, manipulable record of the artifact down to the millimeter. This digital immortality serves a vital, urgent purpose. By creating a perfect baseline model, conservators can monitor the sphere's condition with forensic detail. They can return year after year, take new scans, and compare them to the original. Is a tiny new crack appearing from thermal stress? Is the polish slowly being eaten away by lichen at a measurable rate? This technology turns preservation into a science, allowing experts to detect threats long before the human eye would notice, and to test conservation methods in a virtual space before ever touching the precious stone. But the value goes far beyond simple guardianship. These three-dimensional models unlock analytical possibilities that were once pure fantasy. Researchers can digitally slice a sphere in half to calculate its exact volume and center of mass. They can enhance the surface texture, highlighting micro-scratches and tool marks that have been smoothed by centuries of weathering. A faint groove, invisible under normal light, might suddenly emerge in the digital scan, revealing the specific grinding pattern used by an ancient craftsperson. These are the fingerprints of the makers, preserved in stone and now visible in silicon. Perhaps most thrillingly, this technology offers a chance to experiment with the past. Using the precise coordinates from a site like Finca 6, researchers can place digital spheres back into a virtual landscape. They can then test alignment theories with brutal accuracy, rotating the virtual sky to see if a line of spheres truly points to a solstice sunrise in the year 1000, or if a triangle frames a specific star cluster. It allows for endless experimentation without disturbing a single grain of soil. And finally, these models democratize wonder. A perfect digital sphere can be explored online by a student in Tokyo or a researcher in London. It can be printed as a tactile replica for the visually impaired, or used to create immersive virtual reality experiences that let anyone walk among the ancient arrangements. This digital layer does not replace the profound presence of the original stone, but it builds a bridge across time and distance, ensuring that the legacy of the Diquís is not just preserved in a static form, but actively explored and understood by a global generation of new eyes. Yet for all our scanning and study, the core questions remain stubbornly open. We can measure their perfection, but we still cannot name their primary purpose. Was it one grand, unified reason that drove this centuries-long project, or did the meaning of the spheres shift and evolve as cultures always do? The debate between the astronomical, the social, and the spiritual explanations continues, not because one is clearly wrong, but because each feels compellingly right. Perhaps the most likely answer is that the spheres were never just one thing. For a sophisticated society, a single object could hold layered meaning. A line of spheres might have simultaneously marked a solstice sunrise for the priests, demarcated the territory of a powerful chief for the people, and represented a sacred pathway of ancestors for the community. The genius of the Diquís may have been in creating a symbol so potent, so geometrically pure, that it could contain all these meanings at once, speaking to every level of their world in a silent, shared language. This layered possibility makes the search for a single, simple answer feel almost beside the point. The real mystery is how they wove so much significance into a form of such elegant simplicity. This ambiguity fuels the ongoing research. Modern archaeology is no longer a solitary pursuit with a shovel. It is a collaborative conversation between disciplines. At protected sites, careful excavations continue, not aiming to move the spheres, but to understand the ground they sit on. Teams sift the surrounding soil, millimeter by millimeter, searching for the faintest traces of the people who lived with these giants. A single discarded stone hammer, a patch of charcoal from a craftsman's fire, or a pottery fragment depicting a sphere itself, any of these could be a revolutionary clue. Beyond the trench, astronomers run complex software models, feeding in the precise GPS coordinates of spheres still in their original placements to test celestial alignments against the ancient sky. Ethnographers work closely with descendant communities, listening for cultural echoes in modern traditions that might reflect older patterns of thought about landscape and sacred geometry. Geologists analyze the stone's composition with new tools, tracing each sphere back to its specific quarry with a fingerprint-like certainty, mapping the ancient routes of transport across the region. Each season of fieldwork, each new technological application, adds another small piece to a puzzle that is millennia old. A newly discovered tool mark might hint at a refined carving technique. A soil analysis might reveal a pattern of post holes around a sphere, suggesting it was once enclosed by a ceremonial structure. These are not headline-grabbing breakthroughs, but they are the essential, patient work of reconstruction. They remind us that the story of the Diquís is not a closed book, but a manuscript we are still learning to read. The complete picture of their puzzling perfection is not lost. It is simply coming into focus one patient discovery at a time, inviting us to keep looking and to keep wondering at what these silent stones have yet to say. Their geometric perfection makes them irresistible to storytellers. Beyond the scientific journals and museum halls, the stone spheres of Costa Rica have rolled straight into the heart of global pop culture, becoming a universal shorthand for ancient mystery. You can find them as central puzzles in best-selling adventure novels, featured in countless documentaries exploring the world's unsolved enigmas, and even rendered as digital artifacts in popular video games where players might uncover their secrets in a virtual jungle. Their most famous silver screen moment came in 2008 in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. In the film's opening sequence, Indy and his partner crash land in a warehouse filled with crates, and one crate splits open to reveal a familiar, perfectly round stone object. While the movie quickly veers into tales of alien crystal skulls, that initial iconic shot was a direct nod to the real-world spheres, instantly signaling to the audience that they were about to dive into a realm of archaeological wonder. Of course, Hollywood took creative liberties. The spheres in the film were props, and their purpose was woven into a fictional narrative. Yet, that very act of borrowing is profoundly telling. The filmmakers didn't need to invent a new mysterious artifact. They reached for one that already existed, because its form alone carries the weight of a genuine, unsolved puzzle. This pop culture presence is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can spread simplified or fantastical versions of the story, overshadowing the nuanced work of real archaeologists. On the other, it acts as a powerful engine of public fascination. A viewer who sees those spheres in a movie might feel a spark of curiosity, leading them to search online, watch a documentary, or even plan a trip to Costa Rica to see the real things. This cultural echo transforms the spheres from academic subjects into modern myths. They become icons of the unknown, their smooth, enigmatic surfaces reflecting our own collective desire for wonder. In a world that often feels fully mapped and explained, they represent a tangible blank space on the map, a physical reminder that the past still holds beautiful, perfect questions we have not yet answered. This pop culture life ensures their story continues to be told, drawing new generations into the mystery and guaranteeing that the silent stones will never be forgotten. From the silver screen to the heart of the jungle, their story is a bridge across centuries. As we have journeyed from their chaotic discovery in the banana fields to the cutting edge of digital archaeology, the stone spheres of Costa Rica stand as a timeless enigma, a puzzle carved in granite and time. They are at once a masterpiece of human ingenuity and a testament to a vibrant culture whose voice was tragically silenced. We can map their curves with lasers, but we may never fully translate the language they were meant to speak. This is not a failure of science, but a feature of their profound legacy. They remind us in their silent, perfect presence that history is not a solved equation. It is a living conversation, full of beautiful, unanswered questions that push us to look deeper. Their true perfection lies not only in their flawless geometry, but in their enduring ability to puzzle, to inspire, and to humble us. They defy a single, simple explanation because they were born from a world rich with layered meaning. Perhaps the grandest purpose they serve today is to act as a mirror. They reflect our own endless curiosity, our drive to solve problems, and our deep need to find connection with those who walked this earth long before us. In their spherical form, with no beginning and no end, they symbolize the unbroken circle of human aspiration. A Diquís craftsperson, pecking away at a granite boulder under the tropical sun, was engaged in the same fundamental act as a modern scientist programming a laser scanner, a shared quest to impose order, to create meaning, and to leave a mark that says we were here. So perhaps we will never unlock their full, original secret, and maybe in a strange way that is perfectly okay. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only to be cherished. They are meant to endure, to invite every new generation to lean in, to look closer, and to bring their own questions to the stone. They keep the past alive, not as a closed book, but as an open invitation. An invitation to keep marveling at the sheer scope of what human hands and minds can achieve when united by a shared vision. An invitation to remember that the landscape beneath our feet is often a palimpsest, a layered text written in earth and stone, waiting for a patient reader. And most of all, an invitation to wonder, which is, after all, the very beginning of all discovery. What do you think their purpose was? A celestial calendar, a symbol of power, a sacred anchor in the landscape, or something we have not yet dreamed of? Share your theories in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into one of history's most captivating puzzles, be sure to subscribe. There are always more mysteries waiting just beneath the surface.